2/3 of the ear canal, the bony portion of the ear, is made up of the epidermis. It's the outer layer, which is less than 0.1 millimeters in thickness. So it's 1/10 of the thickness compared to the skin that lines the cartilage. But this epidermis layer is so critical. It provides a physical protective barrier, so it protects the dermis and the layer of fat and connective tissue in the outer third of the ear canal and the bone that the skin sits on in the inner 2/3. So the epidermis is your outer layer of defense. It protects the inner layers that it's coating and lining from harmful pathogens, so harmful bacteria, fungi. That epidermis also helps the inner skin to retain its natural moisture. So sitting on the surface of the skin is a thin veneer of fatty oils and sweats. They're hydrophobic, so they repel external water from being absorbed by the epidermis skin. So because the skin likes to absorb water and it can unfortunately overhydrate, it can overabsorb and then swell and expand and burst the membranes. And it also then helps to retain internal moisture from the skin because of the hydrophobic layer, so it traps the moisture inside. Now without that oily, sweaty veneer, internal moisture can rise to the surface of the skin through the epidermis and evaporate, and any external moisture can get absorbed by the epidermis layer, overhydrate, swell and burst, and then that outer layer of skin is breached, that protective membrane is no longer there. So this skin, it's almost as though the skin is overhydrating, it's absorbing moisture, absorbing humidity, and it's just swelling and expanding and bursting at the membranes. It could also be the skin that the moisture within the skin cells is rising to the surface and being absorbed by the outer skin cells as well. And again, similarly, absorbing, overhydrating, and then bursting and swelling at the membranes. So you can macerate fruit, for example. We can put it in a sugar syrup. Strawberries are a very common fruit that a lot of restaurants macerate, and it softens the fruit and it gives a more intense flavour. So not that I'm suggesting you try and taste the macerated skin in the ear, but it's a similar concept. The skin has become softened and damp and wet, and the skin that has died fails to migrate and it almost decomposes in the ear, and then bacteria and fungi can feed on it. It's a vicious cycle. The patient's going to try a dehumidifier in the house just in case there is humidity or excessive humidity that the patient themselves are not fully aware of. I had a case with a patient a few years ago where they had chronic otitis media with effusion. So essentially they had a build-up of catarrh, glue fluid behind the eardrum, and that's because their nasal passages kept getting blocked. The eustachian tube, which is a drainage tube in the ear, it's also the pressure equalizing tube in the ear. It allows any fluid that accumulates in the middle ear, because remember the middle ear is made up of a mucosal membrane, it's a secretory membrane, and fluid can drain out of the middle ear, because we don't want fluid in the middle ear, out of the eustachian tube, through the back of the nose, and either down your throat or it comes out your mouth. And this particular patient, she wasn't really aware that the house that she was living in was very humid until it was highlighted to her by a family member. And for years, she kept suffering from chronic nasal congestion and inflammation, which then led to